Commander John Miller stood at the viewport of the EAS horizon, watching the massive space station grow larger against the backdrop of unfamiliar stars. His stomach tightened. After 20 years in the Earth Alliance Space Force, he never imagined he would be the first human to address beings from other worlds. "Commander, we're receiving docking instructions," said Lieutenant Frank Adams from the communications station. "The translator is working on them now." Miller nodded. "Tell engineering to be ready. We don't know if their docking systems will be fully compatible with ours." The message that had brought them here had arrived just 6 months after humanity achieved faster-than-light travel. A simple greeting, broadcast in mathematical sequences that Earth scientists quickly deciphered, followed by an invitation to meet at these coordinates. No one expected to find a massive coalition of alien species who called themselves the Galactic Council. "Message from the station," Adams continued. "They're sending a welcome committee to greet us once we dock." Miller straightened his uniform. "Patch me through to the crew." The small bridge crew paused their work as Miller cleared his throat. "This is Commander Miller. In 5 minutes, we'll become the first humans to meet the representatives of 17 different intelligent species. Earth is counting on us to make a good impression. Remember your training. Stay calm and follow protocol. Miller out." The ship shuddered slightly as the docking clamps engaged. Miller watched the airlock indicators cycle from red to green. "Atmospheric pressure matches. Oxygen levels compatible," reported Science Officer Lisa Bell. "We can breathe their air, sir." "Good," Miller said. "Adams, Porter, Bell with me. Everyone else stays aboard until we establish basic protocols." The 4 officers gathered at the airlock, each trying to hide their nervousness. Miller nodded to Adams, who pressed the control panel. The door slid open with a soft hiss. The beings waiting on the other side made Miller freeze mid-step. 7 different species stood in a loose semicircle, each more alien than anything humanity had imagined. A tall, slender creature with blue-tinted skin stepped forward. "Welcome to Nexus Station," it said, the words coming through the translation devices the humans wore. "I am Assistant Counselor Vren of the Ardani. The High Counselor awaits you in the council chambers." Miller found his voice. "Thank you for... You're welcome. I am Commander John Miller of the Earth Alliance Space Force. These are my officers." As they walked through the curved hallways of the station, Miller tried not to stare at the various aliens they passed. Some resembled insects, others looked almost plant-like, and several defied easy comparison to any Earth life form. "The Council has observed your planet for many years," Vren explained. "Now that you have developed faster-than-light travel, you qualify for official contact under Council protocols." "You've been watching us?" Bell asked before she could stop herself. "Of course," Vren replied. "We monitor all developing worlds. The Council has strict rules about when contact can be established." They entered an enormous circular chamber. Curved rows of seats surrounded a central platform. Most seats were filled with beings of different shapes and sizes. All eyes, or what Miller assumed were eyes, turned toward the humans. A massive creature that resembled a cross between a dinosaur and a crocodile rose from one of the front rows. It stood nearly 9 feet tall with dark scales covering its muscular body. Sharp teeth gleamed when it opened its mouth. "So these are the humans," it said, voice deep and rumbling even through the translator. "Smaller than I expected." Miller felt a primitive chill run down his spine. Every instinct told him this creature was a predator. "Ambassador Krell of the Draxian Empire," Vren introduced with a slight bow. "One of our most distinguished council members." Krell leaned closer, to the humans, nostrils flaring. Soft skin, no claws, dull teeth. How did such creatures ever become dominant on their world? Before Miller could respond, another voice spoke from the center platform. "That is enough, Ambassador. We welcome all spacefaring species without judgment of their physical forms." The speaker was a tall, gray-skinned being with 4 arms and large pupilless eyes. It wore an elaborate robe covered in symbols. "I am High Counselor Zakroth of the Valdar," it said. "Please approach." Miller led his team to the central platform, conscious of hundreds of alien eyes watching their every move. "Commander Miller of Earth," Zakroth said, "the Council has voted to extend an invitation for humanity to establish diplomatic relations. You may send representatives to learn our protocols and customs, after which your world may apply for observer status." "Thank you, High Counselor," Miller replied. Earth would be honored to join the galactic community. A harsh laugh came from where Krell stood. Honored? They should be grateful. A primitive species barely out of its planetary cradle, granted access to the knowledge of civilizations thousands of years more advanced. Miller kept his expression neutral despite the insult. "We have much to learn, certainly. But perhaps we also have something to contribute." Krell's scales rippled in what Miller guessed was amusement. "And what could humans possibly offer that the 17 most advanced species in the galaxy do not already possess?" "A fresh perspective," Miller answered calmly. "Sometimes those who see things for the first time notice what others have grown accustomed to overlooking." The chamber filled with murmurs, some seemingly approving, others clearly not. Zakroth raised a hand for silence. "Commander Miller and his team will be given quarters on diplomatic level 3. A cultural orientation will begin tomorrow. Ambassador Krell, your species will provide security during their stay, as is customary for the newest council member to meet the newest petitioning world." Miller saw a gleam in Krell's reptilian eyes that looked far from friendly. "My guards will ensure their safety," Krell said, showing his teeth in what was definitely not a smile. Over the next week, Miller and his crew learned the basics of council structure, technology sharing protocols, and diplomatic customs. They met representatives from most member species, some friendly, others coldly formal, a few openly hostile. The Draxians were the worst. The reptilian aliens took every opportunity to demonstrate their physical superiority, standing too close, moving too quickly, displaying their claws and teeth. Their guards followed the humans everywhere, more like prison guards than protectors. During a cultural briefing, Miller learned that the Draxians were considered apex predators, even among spacefaring species. They had evolved as the unchallenged hunters on their harsh homeworld, and their temperament reflected this heritage. No other species challenged Draxians directly. It was considered both suicidal and a severe breach of diplomatic protocol. 2. Weeks after their arrival, Miller received an official invitation. Earth was granted permission to establish a permanent diplomatic mission on Nexus Station. Additional human personnel would be allowed to transfer from the horizon. Among the new arrivals was Lieutenant Samantha Taylor, a specialist in xenobiology who had been studying the preliminary data sent back. Miller briefed her personally on station protocols. "Whatever you do," he warned, "avoid direct confrontation with the Draxians. They're looking for any excuse to prove humans are unworthy of council membership." Taylor nodded, her expression serious. "Understood, Commander. I'll keep my distance." Miller had no way of knowing that within 24 hours, this earnest lieutenant would create the biggest diplomatic crisis in council history, all because of one instinctive human reaction to a misbehaving predator. Lieutenant Samantha Taylor loved the botanical gardens on Nexus Station. Here, among the carefully maintained plants from 1,000 worlds, she could almost forget she was on a space station millions of miles from Earth. Today, she was leading a small group of junior diplomats through the Earth section, which displayed plants they had brought as gifts to the Council. "This is lavender," she explained to the 3 Meldorian diplomats who followed her. The small, blue-skinned aliens leaned forward, their large eyes blinking with interest. "On Earth, we use it for medicine, cooking, and because we enjoy the smell." One of the Meldorians waved a sensing appendage over the purple flowers. "It creates a pleasant vibration in our receptors," it agreed. Taylor smiled. The Meldorians were among the friendliest species they had met so far, unlike the Draxians. As if her thoughts had summoned trouble, she heard a commotion near the artificial pond. Visitors were quickly moving away from something, their body language showing clear signs of fear. "Wait here, please," Taylor told the Meldorians. She walked toward the disturbance, one hand resting on her communication device in case she needed to call security. A massive Draxian emerged from behind a stand of tall, purple plants. He was younger than Ambassador Krell, but just as intimidating. Nearly 9 feet tall with gleaming black scales, he wore minimal clothing that seemed designed to show off his muscular physique rather than cover it. 4 smaller Draxians followed him, clearly subordinates by the way they kept their heads slightly lower than his. The young Draxian noticed Taylor and changed direction, moving toward her with predatory grace. The garden visitors quickly scattered, leaving a wide space around them. "A human," the Draxian said, his translator making the words sound like a growl. "I am Varex, nephew of Ambassador Krell. You will tell me about your species' defensive capabilities." It wasn't a request. Taylor kept her face neutral, remembering Commander Miller's warning. "I'm Lieutenant Taylor. I specialize in biology, not defense. Perhaps one of our military liaisons could better answer your questions." Varex moved closer, using his height to loom over her. "I did not ask for your specialty. I asked about your defenses. You have no claws." He held up his own hand, extending sharp talons. "No natural armor." He tapped his scaled chest. "No fangs." He opened his mouth to display rows of pointed teeth. Taylor stepped back, maintaining a professional distance. "Humans develop tools instead of natural weapons. Our strength lies in our minds and our ability to adapt." The Draxian made a sound that the translator interpreted as laughter. "Tools. Yes, we've studied your primitive weapons. Without them, you are prey, not predators." The Meldorians had moved closer despite the tension, their curiosity apparently stronger than their fear. They stood near a display of earth plants that Taylor had personally arranged that morning. Varex noticed them watching. With deliberate slowness, he reached out and swept his clawed hand through the plant display, knocking over pots and breaking stems. Soil scattered across the garden path. "Oops," he said, his reptilian face twisting into what might have been a smile. "How clumsy of me." Taylor felt her face grow hot. Those plants had been carefully transported from Earth, rare specimens meant as gifts to foster goodwill. Weeks of work ruined in seconds by a bully showing off. "That was unnecessary," she said firmly. "Those were diplomatic gifts." Varex turned to her, his yellow eyes narrowing. "You dare criticize me, human?" He took a step toward her, his posture changing. His neck expanded slightly, scales rising along his spine. He opened his mouth wider than seemed possible and let out a low, rumbling growl that made the air vibrate. Taylor saw every alien in the vicinity freeze in terror. Even Varex's own entourage backed away. She recognized a threat display when she saw one. Growing up on a farm in Nebraska with 3 large guard dogs had taught her that much. And without thinking, she reacted exactly as she would have to. One of her dogs when it misbehaved. She stepped forward instead of back. With quick, confident movement, she slapped Varex firmly on the snout, not hard enough to hurt, but with enough force to startle. And in a clear, commanding voice, she said, "No, bad behavior. We don't do that here." The silence that followed was absolute. Not a sound could be heard except the gentle bubbling of the pond. Every being in the garden stood frozen, many with expressions of horror or disbelief. Varex himself seemed the most shocked. His yellow eyes widened, his threat display deflated, and he took a small step backward. For a brief moment he looked confused, his primitive brain processing a reaction his species had likely never encountered. Then reality crashed back. Varex let out a roar that shook the leaves on nearby plants. "You touched me. A human dared to touch a Draxian noble." Taylor stood her ground despite her racing heart. She hadn't meant to create an incident, but backing down now seemed worse. "You destroyed diplomatic gifts and threatened me. Where I come from, that behavior deserves correction." One of Varex's entourage found his voice. "This is unprecedented. No species has ever dared to physically challenge a Draxian. The Council will hear of this outrage." Taylor's communication device buzzed. Commander Miller's voice came through, sounding urgent. Taylor, what's happening? Security alerts are lighting up all over the diplomatic section. Before she could answer, station security officers arrived, a mix of various species, notably with no Draxians among them. They approached cautiously, clearly unsure how to handle the situation. The head security officer, a tall insectoid being, addressed them both. Lieutenant Taylor, Honored Varix, please accompany us to the security office. This incident requires documentation. Varix snarled. There is nothing to document. This human assaulted me. She must be punished according to Draxian custom. The security officer's antennae twitched nervously. All incidents involving diplomatic personnel must follow council protocols. Please let us proceed calmly. As Taylor was escorted away, she noticed something strange. While Varix continued to rage and threaten, many of the other aliens were looking at her differently. Not with fear or shock, but with something that seemed almost like respect. The Meldorians watched her pass. One of them made a gesture she hadn't seen before, touching its heart area with both hands. Brave human, it whispered as she walked. By within an hour, security footage of the incident was spreading throughout Nexus Station. The simple action, a human female slapping a Draxian like a misbehaving pet, was being viewed by thousands of beings across multiple species. The security office, Taylor sat alone in a small room, wondering if she had just started an interstellar war. The door slid open and Commander Miller entered, his face grave. Lieutenant, he said, sitting across from her, you've created the biggest diplomatic crisis in human history. Ambassador Krell is demanding you be handed over for Draxian justice. Whatever that means. Half the council is in an uproar. Taylor swallowed hard. I'm sorry, sir, I reacted instinctively. Miller looked at her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. Apparently, in 3,000 years of council history, no one has ever treated a Draxian like you just did. The diplomatic corps is going crazy trying to figure out how to handle this. Am I being court-martialed? Not yet, Miller said. Something strange is happening. We're getting back-channel messages from several council species. They're impressed. The Draxians have been bullies for centuries, and you just stood up to them in a way no one ever has. Taylor wasn't sure if that made things better or worse. What happens now? Miller stood up. Now we face the Galactic Council, and hope your farm girl instincts haven't doomed humanity's place among the stars. Commander Miller stood at the center of the council chamber, feeling the weight of 17 alien species watching him. The circular room buzzed with tense whispers in dozens of languages. The emergency session had been called just 6 hours, after what station residents were now calling the slap incident. This is a direct attack on Draxian honor, Ambassador Krell roared from his position at the front of the chamber. His scales had darkened to an angry black color, and his claws were fully extended. The human female must be surrendered to us for proper punishment under Draxian law. High Counselor Zakroth raised all 4 of his hands, calling for order. Commander Miller, you may speak on behalf of your species. Miller took a deep breath. High Counselor, members of the Council, I apologize for any breach of protocol by Lieutenant Taylor. However, I must point out that the incident was provoked when Varix deliberately destroyed diplomatic gifts and made threatening gestures toward a human representative. Irrelevant. Krell slammed his massive fist on the railing. No being touches a Draxian without permission. In 3,000 years of council history, no species has ever dared such an insult. A small, furry alien that Miller recognized as Ambassador Plex of the Rundi spoke up. Perhaps we should review the security footage before making judgments. The main view screen lit up, showing the garden scene from multiple angles. The council watched as Varix knocked over the earth plants, then made his threatening display. When Taylor's slap came, there was an audible gasp throughout the chamber. As you can see, Miller continued, Lieutenant Taylor responded to a clear threat. On Earth, her reaction would be considered measured and appropriate. Measured? Krell's voice rose to a roar. She treated a noble Draxian like a pet, finished a tall, bird-like alien from the upper tier. That's what's truly interesting about this incident. The human showed no fear whatsoever. The chamber erupted into multiple conversations. Miller could see various factions forming, some clearly supporting the Draxians, others seeming almost pleased by Taylor's actions. High Counselor Zakroth raised his hands again. Commander Miller, do humans typically respond to threats in this manner? When the threat comes from an animal that we believe can be trained, yes, Miller answered honestly. Lieutenant Taylor grew up on a farm with large working animals. Her instinct was to correct behavior she saw as inappropriate. She treated my nephew like an animal. Krell's roar echoed through the chamber. With respect, Ambassador, Miller replied. Your nephew was behaving like one. Stunned silence fell across the chamber. Miller knew he was taking a risk, but backing down now seemed worse. This meeting is adjourned for one standard cycle, Zakroth announced. The Council will deliberate on this incident. Until then, Lieutenant, Taylor will remain in protective custody and no action will be taken by any species. He looked pointedly at Krell. Is that understood, Ambassador? Krell's only response was a low growl. As Miller left the chamber, several alien representatives approached him. The bird-like alien introduced himself as Ambassador Kier of the Avis Confederation. Your lieutenant has unwittingly changed something fundamental today, Kier said quietly. For millennia, the Draxians have used intimidation to get their way, in council matters. Many of us have privately wished for someone to stand up to them. Miller saw similar sentiments in the eyes of several other species. What happens now? That depends on what your xenobiologists discover, Kier replied cryptically before walking away. Back at the human quarters, Dr. Greg Peters was working frantically at his console when Miller entered. Commander, you need to see this, Peters said without looking up. I've been reviewing everything we know about Draxian biology and comparing it to Earth species. Miller looked at the screen, seeing brain scans side by side. What am I looking at? Left is a Draxian brain from the medical database. Right is a Earth canine. Peters pointed to similar structures highlighted in both images. See these neural pathways? They're almost identical to what we see in domesticated predators on Earth. You're saying Draxians are like dogs? Miller asked incredulously. Not exactly. They're apex predators who evolved to be the dominant species on their planet. But look at their evolutionary history. Peters pulled up another file. Draxians lived in strict hierarchical packs before developing higher intelligence. Their brains still retain structures that respond to dominant signals. And Taylor accidentally triggered those signals? Exactly. Peters looked excited. That firm slap on the snout, the direct eye contact, the commanding voice, and these are all dominant signals that work on Earth predators. The security footage shows Varrix's momentary confusion. His primitive brain recognized the signals even while his higher functions were outraged. So what does this mean for our current situation? Peters leaned back. It means we might understand Draxians better than species who've known them for centuries. Everyone's been too afraid to discover their psychological vulnerabilities. Miller's communicator beeped. It was a message from Zakroth's office. Lieutenant Taylor would be released for a private meeting with the High Counselor. 20 minutes later, Miller and Taylor stood in Zakroth's private chambers. The High Counselor studied them thoughtfully. In my 800 years, Zakroth said, I have never seen the Council so divided. Half believe you should be expelled from Council space immediately. The other half find your species intriguing. And, what do you believe, High Counselor? Miller asked. I believe in understanding before judgment. Zakroth turned to Taylor. Tell me, Lieutenant, what went through your mind when you struck Varrix? Taylor looked uncomfortable. Honestly, sir, I wasn't thinking at all. I reacted exactly as I would to one of my farm dogs when it misbehaved. A quick correction, not to hurt, but to establish boundaries. Fascinating. Zakroth's large eyes blinked slowly. And you weren't afraid? Not really. I've handled aggressive animals all my life. Sometimes showing fear makes things worse. Zakroth made a sound Miller couldn't interpret. Ambassador Krell has formally requested your surrender. However, there is an alternative under ancient council law. Varrix may issue a formal challenge under Draxian tradition. A challenge? Miller asked. What does that mean? A ritual combat to resolve the dispute. If Lieutenant Taylor wins, the matter is settled in humanity's favor. If she loses, I'll do it, Taylor said before Miller could object. Lieutenant, no. Miller turned to her. We don't even know what this combat involves. Dr. Peters explained. His theory to me, Taylor replied. If I'm right about Draxian psychology, I might have a chance. And if you're wrong, Miller demanded. Taylor shrugged. Then humanity loses one person instead of its place among the stars. Zakroth seemed impressed. The challenge will take place tomorrow. I suggest you prepare, Lieutenant. In 3,000 years, no one has ever defeated a Draxian in ritual combat. After Zakroth left them alone, Miller turned to Taylor. This is insane. We can't let you fight a 9-foot alien predator. What's our alternative? Taylor asked. Surrender me to the Draxians? Leave Council space forever? This might be humanity's only chance. Miller wanted to argue further, but saw the determination in her eyes. Peters will brief you on everything he's discovered about Draxian psychology. If there's any weakness we can exploit, we'll find it. As they walked back to the human quarters, Taylor's communicator chirped. It was a message from an unknown source. When she opened it, she found a simple text in Council standard language. Many species watch with hope. The Draxians have been unchallenged for too long. Taylor looked up at Miller. It seems I'm not just fighting for humanity tomorrow. No pressure, Miller said with grim humor. Actually, Taylor replied, that helps. I grew up standing up to bullies. Seems some things are universal, even across the stars. Word of the challenge spread quickly through Nexus Station. By nightfall, every being aboard knew that tomorrow, a human female would face a Draxian in ritual combat, a contest that would determine humanity's future in the galactic community. The ancient combat arena aboard Nexus Station had not been used for an official challenge in over 200 years. Now it was filled to capacity. Representatives from all 17 Council species crowded the viewing platforms, their voices creating a low hum of anticipation. Lieutenant Samantha Taylor stood in the preparation chamber, trying to calm her racing heart. Dr. Peters made final adjustments to her combat suit, a modified version of standard Earth Alliance gear, reinforced with lightweight materials borrowed from friendly Council species. Remember what we discussed, Peters said as he checked the suit's movement. Draxians rely on intimidation first, then overwhelming force. Their psychology is their weakness. Taylor nodded. She had spent the night studying Peters' research and watching recordings of Draxian body language. Direct eye contact, firm commands, no signs of fear or submission. Exactly. Peters looked worried despite his confident tone. They're primitive. Brain structures might respond to dominant signals, but Varix will be expecting that now. He won't be caught off guard again. Commander Miller entered the chamber, his face grim. It's time. The Council is ready. Taylor took a deep breath. Any last advice, Commander? Miller placed a hand on her shoulder. Just remember, you're fighting for more than yourself. The entire human race is counting on you. He paused. No pressure. Taylor managed a smile. I grew up handling animals 3 times my size. Never thought those farm skills would determine humanity's fate among the stars. The preparation chamber doors slid open. Taylor walked into the arena to complete silence. The circular space was about 50 feet across, with a floor covered in a material that looked like sand, but felt slightly springy underfoot. Good for traction, but would cushion falls. On the opposite side, another door opened. Varix entered, his black scales gleaming under the bright lights. He had removed his ceremonial armor, wearing only a simple covering around his lower body. His muscles rippled as he moved, claws fully extended, yellow eyes fixed on Taylor. High Counselor Zakroth's voice echoed through the arena. This challenge will follow ancient protocol. Combat continues until one participant yields or is unable to continue. Lethal force is permitted, but not required for victory. He paused. Both parties have accepted these terms. The challenge begins now. For a moment, neither combatant moved. Taylor could see Varix assessing her, probably looking for signs of fear. She kept her posture straight, her gaze steady. She would not give him the satisfaction of seeing her afraid. With shocking speed for his size, Varix charged across the arena. His strategy was clear: end the fight quickly with overwhelming force. Most opponents would dodge or retreat. Instead, Taylor stood her ground. At the last possible second, she made direct eye contact and issued a sharp, commanding sound, similar to what she had used with her guard dogs when they needed immediate correction. The noise wasn't a word in any language, but a sound specifically designed to penetrate primitive brain pathways. Varix faltered, his charge slowing just enough for Taylor to sidestep. As he passed, she delivered another firm slap to his snout, following it with a clear command. "Sit down!" The Draxian skidded to a stop, whirling to face her with rage in his eyes. But Taylor could see confusion there too. His advanced brain wanted to attack, but more primitive structures were responding to her signals. "You dare?" he roared, circling her now. "I will tear you apart, human." Taylor maintained eye contact, her voice low and commanding. "Your behavior is unacceptable. Control yourself." The watching council members murmured in surprise. No one had ever spoken to a Draxian that way in combat. Varix lunged again, this time sweeping with his powerful tail. Taylor jumped over it but wasn't quite fast enough. The tip caught her ankle, sending her rolling across the arena floor. Pain shot through her leg, but she quickly regained her footing. Varix pressed his advantage, closing the distance between them. His claws slashed at her, tearing through the outer layer of her combat suit. Taylor blocked what she could, but one claw found her arm, drawing blood. The crowd gasped. First blood to the Draxian. Many probably expected Taylor to retreat now, to show fear. Instead, she moved forward. "Bad," she said firmly, landing a sharp jab to Varix's sensitive nose area. "No claws." The Draxian blinked rapidly, momentary confusion crossing his face again. That split second was all Taylor needed. She circled to his side, away from his slashing claws, and applied pressure to a specific point where his neck met his shoulder, a nerve cluster that Peters had identified in Draxian anatomy. Varix let out a surprised growl as his right arm temporarily lost strength. He backed away, reassessing this strange human who showed no fear and seemed to know things about Draxian physiology that even other council races didn't. "What magic is this?" he demanded. "Not magic, understanding," Taylor replied, circling him now. "You've relied on fear for so long you don't know what to do when someone isn't afraid of you." The Draxian charged again, but this time his movements seemed less certain. Taylor continued her strategy: firm commands, dominant signals, targeting sensitive areas rather than trying to match his strength. For nearly 20 minutes they continued this strange combat. Taylor took several more hits, each drawing blood or leaving bruises, but nothing disabling. Varix grew increasingly frustrated as his usual tactics failed to produce the expected results. The turning point came when Taylor managed to maneuver Varix near the arena wall. As he charged yet again, she stood her ground until the last second, then dropped to the floor. The surprised Draxian couldn't stop his momentum and slammed headfirst into the wall with a sickening thud. Before he could recover, Taylor was on her feet. She approached the dazed Draxian and, in front of the entire council, firmly grabbed his snout, forcing him to look at her. "Enough," she commanded. "This fight is over. Stand down now." The arena fell silent. No one had ever seen a Draxian handled this way. Varix's yellow eyes showed confusion, then something else, a flicker of recognition at a primal level. His aggressive posture relaxed slightly. For a long moment they stood frozen in this strange tableau, the human firmly holding the snout of a creature 3 times her size, the Draxian seemingly unable to break away from her gaze. Then, to the shock of everyone watching, Varix lowered his head slightly. Not a full submission, but a clear acknowledgement of Taylor's dominance. "The human has proven worthy," he said, the words clearly difficult for him. "I yield the challenge." The silence that followed was absolute. Then the arena erupted in sound, some species cheering, others buzzing or clicking in their own expressions of amazement. The Draxian observers sat in stunned silence. High Counselor Zakroth's voice cut through the noise. The challenge is complete. Lieutenant Samantha Taylor of Earth is victorious. By ancient law, the dispute is resolved in humanity's favor. Taylor stepped back, finally allowing herself to feel the pain of her injuries. Commander Miller rushed into the arena with Dr. Peters, both looking stunned and relieved. "You did it," Miller said as he helped support her. "I don't know how, but you did it." Taylor looked across the arena where Varix was being attended to by his own people. The Draxian caught her eye and, after a moment's hesitation, inclined, his head slightly. Not friendship, certainly, but perhaps a new kind of respect. "I think," Taylor said quietly, "we just changed the balance of power in the Galactic Council." As they left the arena, representatives from various species tried to approach them, all speaking at once. Questions, congratulations, and offers of alliance flowed from beings who had barely acknowledged humans days before. Ambassador Keir of the Avis Confederation managed to reach Taylor's side. "What you have done today," he said softly, "has been the secret dream of a dozen species for centuries. The Draxians will never be seen the same way again." Taylor winced as Dr. Peters applied emergency medical treatment to her wounds. "I didn't set out to humiliate them. I just refused to be intimidated." "Perhaps that is the lesson humanity brings to the stars," Keir replied. "Sometimes the greatest power lies not in having the sharpest claws, but in knowing when not to fear them." 6 months after the combat challenge, Lieutenant Samantha Taylor stood on the observation deck of Nexus Station, watching the arrival of the second human diplomatic vessel. The EAS Discovery glided smoothly into its assigned dock, bringing more human representatives to join the growing Earth Embassy. Taylor's uniform now carried the insignia of Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Council. The promotion had come directly from Earth Alliance headquarters after news of her victory spread across human space. Her daily schedule was filled with diplomatic meetings, cultural exchanges, and the complex task of integrating humanity into the galactic community. "Ambassador Taylor," a deep voice rumbled behind her. "The council session begins in 20 minutes. Taylor turned to find Varix standing there. The Draxian looked different now. He wore the formal attire of a diplomatic aide rather than the minimal clothing that had once showcased his physical prowess. The changes went deeper than clothing. His posture was more controlled, his voice modulated to sound less threatening. "Thank you, Varix," she replied. "Will you be attending as well?" "Yes. Ambassador Krell has assigned me to study human diplomatic methods." Varix hesitated, then added, "My uncle believes there is much the Draxian Empire can learn from your species." This was perhaps the most surprising outcome of what station residents now called the Taylor incident. Rather than holding a grudge, the Draxians had responded to their defeat with a pragmatic reassessment. If humans understood something about Draxian psychology that no other species had discovered, perhaps they had other insights worth learning. Together they walked toward the council chambers. Aliens of various species nodded respectfully as they passed. Taylor no longer felt like a newcomer being tolerated. Humans had earned their place here. "Dr. Peters asked me to remind you about the research presentation tomorrow," Varix said, as they walked. "The preliminary results from the neural mapping studies are ready." The Interspecies Behavioral Research Institute had been Taylor's first initiative as ambassador. With Dr. Peters as its director, the institute studied the neurological and psychological factors that influenced relationships between different evolutionary paths. The Draxians had surprisingly been among the first to volunteer for the research. "I'll be there," Taylor assured him. His work is already changing how species interact on the station. They entered the Grand Council chamber where representatives from all 17 species were taking their places. The human section, once a small temporary area, now had a permanent position. Several council members nodded to Taylor as she took her seat. High Counselor Zakroth called the session to order. "Today we consider the application from Earth to upgrade from probationary status to full council membership. Ambassador Taylor will present humanity's case." Taylor walked to the central platform. 1 year ago, Humans had been unknown in this chamber. Now she stood as their representative, addressing the most powerful governing body in the galaxy. High Counselor, honored representatives, she began, Earth comes before you not as the most technologically advanced species, nor as the most numerous or physically powerful. We come as students eager to learn, but also as teachers offering new perspectives. She gestured to the research data displayed on the main screen. Dr. Peters' work has already identified neural structures common across predatory species throughout the galaxy. The Draxians have been our most valuable research partners in this effort. Ambassador Krell nodded from his seat. The massive Draxian had become an unexpected ally, recognizing that the old tactics of intimidation no longer served his species' interests in this new political landscape. For millennia, Taylor continued, the Council has categorized species based on technology, physical attributes, and territorial reach. Earth proposes adding another dimension to this framework: behavioral adaptability and cross-species empathy. Murmurs of approval spread through the chamber. Ambassador Keir of the Avis Confederation spoke up. The humans have demonstrated this adaptability themselves. In 6 months, they have learned 17 different cultural protocols and established productive relationships with every Council species. Most impressively, added the Meldorian representative, they have done so while remaining authentically human. They do not simply copy others, but find ways to integrate new concepts with their existing values. The debate continued for several hours, with various species raising questions about Earth's readiness. Throughout it all, Taylor found herself thinking about her family farm back in Nebraska. How strange that growing up training animals and standing up to schoolyard bullies had prepared her for galactic diplomacy better than any formal education could have. Finally, Zakroth called for the vote. One by one, the Council members registered their positions. When the results appeared on the main display, Taylor felt a surge of pride. Earth had been accepted as a full Council member by a vote of 15-2. The motion carries, Zakroth announced. Earth is hereby recognized as the 18th member of the Galactic Council, with all rights and responsibilities thereof. As Taylor left the chamber, Commander Miller waited in the corridor. He had remained on Nexus Station as military liaison, while the diplomatic team expanded. Congratulations, Ambassador, he said with a smile. Not bad for someone who started an interstellar incident by slapping an apex predator. Taylor laughed. Who would have thought that would be the perfect introduction to galactic politics? They walked toward the human section of the station, passing the newly installed Earth Garden where visitors from all species now gathered to study human plants and cultural artifacts. Dr. Peters wants to show us something, Miller said. He's quite excited about it. In the research laboratory, Peters was working with a mixed team of human and alien scientists. Holographic brain scans floated in the air, showing neural activity from different species. Ambassador, Commander, you need to see this, Peters said, barely containing his enthusiasm. We've been mapping response patterns across species. Look at these reactions to various stimuli. The displays showed remarkably similar patterns lighting up across seemingly different brains when exposed to certain social cues. All social species, regardless of what planet they evolved on, developed some form of hierarchical understanding, Peters explained. When Taylor confronted Varix, she accidentally triggered response patterns that existed in his brain, but had never been activated by other Council species. Because they were all too afraid to try, Miller noted. Exactly. Fear itself became a self-fulfilling prophecy. For 3,000 years, species assumed Draxians couldn't be reasoned with on certain levels, so they never attempted the very approaches that might have worked. Varix, who had quietly entered the lab, moved closer to study the scans. My species has prided itself on being feared, he said thoughtfully. We never considered that this fear was limiting us as much as it limited others. Taylor looked at the diverse team working together in the lab, humans collaborating with beings from across the galaxy, each bringing unique perspectives to shared problems. I think that's humanity's real contribution to the Council, she said. Not our technology or our military strength, but our willingness to see beyond appearances and find unexpected connections. Later that evening, Taylor returned to her quarters. On her desk sat a small holographic frame showing her family farm in Nebraska, rolling green fields and the barn where she had raised her 3 guard dogs from puppies. Next to this sat her new council member insignia, the symbol of humanity's official place among the stars. Her communication device chimed with a message from High Counselor Zakroth. In 3,000 years, we believed we understood the natural order of species. In 3 minutes, you demonstrated how limited our understanding truly was. Perhaps this is humanity's greatest gift to the stars, the ability to see beyond fear and find common ground where none seemed possible. The galaxy has changed because one human refused to be intimidated by sharp teeth and ancient reputation. Taylor smiled as she prepared for her next day of meetings. The cosmic lesson turned out to be so simple, yet so profound. Sometimes all it took to change the established order of the galaxy was the courage to reach out and slap an apex predator on the nose.